revealed. How an incredible act by a black waitress transformed a mafia boss's son's life forever. Maya's hands trembled as she poured the last glass of Chianti, her back aching beneath the weight of another tireless shift at Bella Notte. The fluorescent lights in the bustling Italian restaurant flickered above her, echoing the chaos of clattering plates and raucous laughter. At 24, she was a master of keeping her emotions at bay, hiding the fears and doubts that crept into her mind late at night when her young son, Jamal, was finally asleep. She glanced over at the tables filled with diners, all entwined in their ephemeral moments of joy, while she was stuck in a loop of serving, cleaning, and calculating bills. She did it for him, to give him a better life, one where he wouldn't have to fight for every inch like she did. But each day morphed into the next, leaving her feeling invisible. The clamor of the restaurant dulled her dreams until only survival remained. The thought of resentment made her pause. It was an indulgence she couldn't afford. Then, just like that, a shadow crossed her path. Danny, the privileged son of a mafia boss. He sauntered in, dripping with nonchalance, frame outlined by the sheen of his designer clothes. He was just another spoiled customer, right? Maya's mind firmly believed that. But when she approached his table, his nonchalance turned to curiosity. "How's your night going?" Danny's eyes seemed to pierce through her forced smile, revealing an unspoken curiosity. They exchanged polite banter, though she sensed an underlying restlessness within him, just as strong as her own. With each passing moment, responses became questions, and before she knew it, she found herself revealing snippets of her life, the challenges, her dedication to Jamal, how each tip was a step closer to his future. There was something genuine about him that stirred something inside her, an unexplored world where privilege didn't always align with happiness. Yet, as Danny recounted tales of his father's looming expectations, horror began to grip her gut. The mafia legacy was a heavy anchor, pulling at him, much like Maya's own struggles. Fear nipped at her, not just for herself, but for him. Could this brat, raised behind gilded gates, truly feel trapped? The swirling emotion demanded an answer. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A sudden intensity rolled in, shattering the facade of light conversation. Maya's heart raced as Danny shared his fear of local gang members, looming threats like a noose tightening around his neck, demanding he step into the darkness of his father's world. She felt the pulse of her own heartbeat in her ears. Here she was, fighting for every dollar, while he battled against a legacy that might drown him. The weight of her own reality pressed against him now, each path littered with peril. And now the stakes rose. Could she help him? Could she get involved in a life that wasn't her own, teetering at the edge of gang violence? What made family worth risking everything? As she stared into Danny's eyes, uncertainty gripped her soul, twisting with the urgency of decisions left unmade. The truth shimmered just out of reach. She had already started crossing boundaries, and the way forward was fogged by fear. The room felt smaller. The noise turned into static. Standing beside him, a wave of courage crashed within her. But what of Jamal? What would he pay for her desire to save someone who didn't know he needed saving? Maya knew the price of emotions rarely measured in anything but pain. And in that moment, she realized. Family was everything. But what was the cost of pursuing one's own redemption when it could cost her child's safety? Just as she opened her mouth to voice her thoughts, beneath all the uncertainty, the air crackled with a tension that would either forge their path or shatter their lives forever. Maya's thoughts whirled, her pulse racing with every flicker of the overhead lights. She looked at Danny, his demeanor a stark contrast to her own turbulent existence. He leaned back in his chair, mask of arrogance fading, revealing vulnerability beneath. It hit her. He didn't just want a savior. He needed a peer. Someone who could understand the depths of despair and the desire to reclaim control over their lives. "Danny," she finally said, cutting through the static, "I can't just step into your world. I have a son to protect." The words left her mouth, but uncertainty trailed behind. She was torn, caught in a whirlpool between self-preservation and empathy. The flickering ambiance of the restaurant suddenly felt like an unrelenting spotlight, exposing her every hesitation, each fear looming larger than the last. He studied her, measuring her resolve. "Maya, don't you want something more than this? You care for your son, but you're suffocating in this place." "More than what?" she asked defensively, masking her rising agitation with a veneer of defiance. "The last thing I need is to be entangled in a web of crime and danger." "You're already standing on the edge," he countered, his voice low but firm. "Your resentment is a heavy chain. Let it go. We can both break free." What did he know about her struggle? Each word he spoke chipped away at her defenses, yet a seed of intrigue ignited within her. The notion of change shimmered before her, enticing yet terrifying. She was no stranger to chains. She had forged her own links with sweat and endurance. Could she really assist him in severing the ones binding his fate? Maya's thoughts shifted. Her time spent at Bellanotte was merely a backdrop for dreams that had long been buried. Years of toil, each hour spent running from one table to another. For what? To barely scrape by, suffocating in a reality that kept getting colder. But looming in the shadows stood a chance for transformation, not just for the privileged son of a Mafia boss, but for herself. "We could help each other," she ventured, voice shaky yet emboldened. "But I can't afford to lose Jamal in the process. Every decision must be calculated." Her thoughts raced as she redefined her goals. If she wanted to be more than a waitress, to carve a path beyond survival, she had to embrace risk. But was she ready to dive into these unknown waters? Danny's eyes flickered with something resembling hope. Should she dare to believe that he shared her conviction? "Together," he proposed, his tone softening, "we stand a chance, one that neither of us has on our own." Maya pondered for a moment, this unexpected partnership tantalizing yet daunting. What did it mean to step out of the shadows and into the light, especially when shadows held the ones she loved most? She could almost hear Jamal's laughter, unmarred by the weight of their realities. Yet, at the back of her mind, a fear resonated. Why her? If they fought this battle together, what shadows would they stir? The thought danced in the corners of her mind, taunting her courage. Would their bond, once an anchor, transform into a liability? The decision before her loomed like an impending storm, a clash of emotions crashing against her heart's defenses. Could she take the plunge, setting aside her fears to cultivate this risk-laden alliance? Just then, the restaurant door swung open, letting in a sudden gust of cold air that stung at their heated exchange. A group of rough-looking individuals stepped inside, their presence like a storm brewing. Eyes locked on Danny, the atmosphere in the room shifted, thickening with palpable tension. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The stakes had just escalated dramatically. "Get down!" she shouted instinctively, her instincts honed by years of survival flaring to life, even as her mind raced to recall her future decisions with Danny. What were the next steps? She looked at Danny, who was frozen in place, adrenaline coursing through both of them as they faced the unknown together. The weight of their shared realities met tension in that moment, one that could alter the trajectories of their lives forever. Maya's heart thundered in her chest as the men entered. She felt the cold draft more intensely, a stark reminder of the danger that now surrounded them. The familiar clattering of dishes and low murmur of conversations evaporated, replaced by palpable silence. Her survival instincts kicked in, sending her thoughts spiraling through a maze of possibilities. What were these men after? Every instinct screamed at her to protect herself, to shield Jamal from the fallout of this chaotic situation. Yet here she was, entangled in a world far removed from her routine life of serving tables. Danny remained rigid, his expression a canvas of uncertainty that mirrored her own. "Do something," she whispered, urgency sharpening her voice as she tugged at Danny's sleeve. Their dynamic felt flipped. She was now urging him to act, the roles in their fleeting partnership shifting rapidly. In that moment, she felt something stir deep within her, a realization that every choice she made held weight, every action could tip the scale. He blinked, momentarily pulled from his shock. He faltered, glancing at the group. The trio loomed menacingly, crystal clear in their intent. Maya's mind was a flurry of calculations as she weighed their options, adrenaline sharpening her focus. "Stay low and follow my lead," she commanded, grounding her voice despite the chaos. For too long, she had allowed others to dictate her life. Wasn't this the moment she had to take control? The restaurant, the plates, the pent-up frustration of her monotonous existence crystallized into clarity. If she wanted to break free, she had to embrace uncertainty, even when it terrified her. Maya crouched low and edged toward the back, brainstorming as she moved. She had grown adept at reading situations. It was her lifeline as a single mother. She envisioned the layout of the diner, the narrow space between tables, the kitchen door that could provide an escape route. Relying on her gut, she grabbed Danny's hand, pulling him to the side. "We can't stay here. What do you suggest?" His voice was steady, but panic simmered just beneath the surface. Her instincts surged. "We go to the kitchen. There's an exit behind it." The grip of his hand in hers felt grounding, a tether that unleashed a surge of competence she didn't know she possessed. If she could guide Jamal through life's dangers, she could do the same for Danny. "Okay." He nodded, determination shaking off his previous days. Together, they crept toward the kitchen, her pulse steadying as she took charge, the weight of her previous frustrations morphing into resolute confidence. They slipped through the threshold, into the sanctuary of the kitchen, surrounded by the scents of fried garlic and simmering marinara sauce. The chaos outside felt muted, yet the threat remained. Each clang of pots and pans behind the kitchen doors mirrored her heart. Their lives were at stake, and yet this was no longer just about survival for herself, or even for Jamal. Now what? Danny's eyes darted to the back door, weighing their next steps. "Wait for my signal. When I open that door, we bolt." "Stick close," she instructed, her voice a strange blend of nerves and clarity. The potential for personal transformation rippled through her. She was not just a caretaker, but a protector, standing against unraveling chaos. As the voices of their pursuers grew louder, she felt a surge of purpose. It was in that anxiety-laden moment that a realization struck her. Perhaps she wasn't merely stepping into the unknown for Danny. This act of bravery was reclaiming her own narrative, an assertion of independence in a world that had too often relegated her to the sidelines. Before she could dwell on the weight of this epiphany, she pressed her back against the door, her breath steadying. "Now!" she shouted, swinging the door open. The world beyond was in disarray, but she was ready to dive in. Rushing forward, Danny mirrored her movements. The rush spilled them into the alleyway behind the restaurant. A cacophony erupted from within, as Maya turned to check if Danny was beside her. He was, eyes wide. Yet the fear had transformed into something resembling exhilaration. She could sense it. He, too, was awakening to the possibility of their shared fight, the strength that could emerge from their unlikely alliance. But the shadows didn't just linger behind them. A new tension was building on this uncertain horizon. What they had to face next was not just the repercussions of their escape, but the realization that this journey tested more than their limits. It called into question the choices they would make moving forward. "Where do we go from here?" Danny asked, breathless. Maya's mind raced, The answer was as murky as the shadows trailing them. "Wherever it takes us," she replied, determination rising within her. "But I won't let fear dictate my next moves." As she turned to face the impending chaos, the thrill of danger hung heavy in the air. This was only the beginning of their fight, their bond, and perhaps even her own liberation. She couldn't help but wonder if in walking alongside the son of a Mafia boss, she was destined to be part of something greater than herself. But the question loomed large. Were they ready for what they would uncover together? Maya's breath formed quick, visible puffs in the cool alley air as she and Danny pressed against the grimy brick wall. The diner's chaos echoed faintly behind them. But other sounds, gruff voices that threatened to pursue, crawled closer, their urgency breaking through the adrenaline haze. She clenched her fists, allowing the fear to crystallize into determination. "Where do we hide?" Danny's voice quivered as he scanned their surroundings, assessing alleyway exits and shadows like an instinctive soldier surveying a battlefield. "Not too far. We need to keep moving. The longer we stay still, the more time they have to find us." Each decision pushed her closer to a clarity she hadn't acknowledged before. A sense of responsibility wrapped around her like an armor, shielding her from the fear that threatened to seep in. Maya didn't have time for hesitation. The stakes were too high. In that moment, she cursed her past, a life spent on the periphery, where her choices had been limited to surviving day by day. The waitress facade, the service industry grind. It felt lightweight, formless compared to the weight of what lay ahead. "We'll head to the loading dock. It has cover. It's also where deliveries are made. We can use that to slip out." "Got it." Danny followed her lead, trusting her instincts even in the chaos that surrounded them. The urgency of the moment propelled her forward, revealing an unexpected new facet of herself. A leader who could adapt and strategize under pressure. Transformative moments didn't always come with grand recognition. Sometimes they arrived quietly yet fiercely in dark alleys. As they hurried towards the loading dock, Maya felt the flurry of thoughts sharpen into focus. The fear of being just a waitress was fading. Every step towards the dock was a step away from that mundane life, towards a burgeoning self-identity. A woman capable of confronting her circumstances, capable of shaping her own future. In the safety of the shadows, they paused for a moment, her mind racing with possibilities. The confrontation was nearing. The unknown weighed heavily in the air like the impending storm. "If this escalates, I want you to listen to me. We stick together no matter what. Do you understand?" A glimmer of recognition sparkled in Danny's eyes. "Yeah, I won't let you go alone." The weight of his words sent a jolt through her. It felt like a pact. They were no longer individuals running from danger. They were partners facing an uncertain reality together. But what did partnership really mean? Was trust merely circumstantial, or could this connection withstand the tempest raging beyond the alley's confines? A moment of hesitation flickered in the air as they drew near the entrance to the loading dock. The old door creaked ominously, as if echoing the weight of choices yet to be made. Could she allow herself to feel that trust? After years of being let down, was she willing to take that risk again, especially with someone whose life was so entangled in the dangers she detested? "Let's go," she urged, squaring her shoulders in preparation. "Stay close, but keep your eyes peeled." As they stepped through the door into the dimly lit loading area, a new sense of urgency washed over her. The dull thump of her heart reverberated in her ears, syncing with her intensifying determination. The stakes were rising. Time was running out. Suddenly, the low growl of a car's engine echoed from the distance. Maya froze, her instincts screaming at her. She felt the weight of the moment coalesce into a singular truth. They had crossed the threshold into something far more complex than mere survival. This was an awakening, a challenge of not just external danger, but of the very essence of who she was and what she stood for. "Wait." Danny's voice faltered as the headlights of the car flickered through the narrow passageway, painting elongated shadows on the walls. For a moment, Fear flickered like a candle flame, revealing the raw vulnerability hidden beneath their brave facades. As the car drew nearer, Maya confronted the reality of choices that lay ahead. Would she continue this fight? And at what cost? They had both stepped off the familiar path, into a world where loyalties shifted and decisions could spell disaster. "Are you ready for this?" Danny whispered, the shadows deepening in his gaze. Maya inhaled deeply, feeling the embers of her resolve spark brighter. "I've never been more ready." The doors of the loading dock stood as the threshold to their next strike against fate. She knew one thing for certain. The reckoning had only just begun. And amidst the uncertainty, something powerful was beginning to awaken within her. A fierce, undeniable strength that might just shift the balance forever. But as she prepared to face whatever was behind those lights, a new thought rooted itself in her psyche. Was transformation part of the journey, or was it the destination itself? The engine's growl transformed into a grating roar, the headlights washing over the loading dock like a tidal wave of uncertainty. Shadows danced around Maya and Danny, deepening their anxieties, yet illuminating the unforeseen strengths within them. They were no longer mere fugitives. They were seekers on the cusp of discovery. Within the tangles of her fear emerged a fierce clarity. This moment would not pass silently. It compelled her to reckon with the dichotomy of her existence, the life she'd lived, and the new world unfolding before her. Ironically, the chaos also brought focus, steeping her every thought in a potent mixture of adrenaline and resolve. Could stepping into their adversaries' shadows illuminate her potential, or would it lead to further ruin? "Stay low," Maya whispered, her voice even though the tremor in her gut betrayed her. She motioned for Danny to crouch behind a stack of boxes. Every instinct told her to flee, yet the urgency of the situation propelled her towards confrontation. They sought concealment among the boxes when a flicker of movement caught her eye. Just beyond the halo of light, figures emerged, their silhouettes grotesque against the backdrop of the dimly lit dock. They moved like ghosts, swift, assured, dangerous. In that moment, Maya glimpsed not just their forms but the emerging contours of a resolve she didn't know she possessed. "This isn't just about running anymore," she mused internally as she tore her gaze from Danny. The fear of her previous life tethered her thoughts, but that tether was fraying. She had stood by for far too long. It was time to seize the narrative. With every ounce of bravery that fluttered within her chest, she exhaled the lingering doubts that clung like cobwebs. Suddenly, sunlight spiraled through a narrow gap, illuminating an escape route behind the other end of the dock. The decision crystallized in her mind. This wasn't just about escape. It was about empowerment. "We need to move," she whispered, her heartbeat mounting in tempo. "We take that route." Danny's eyes searched hers, filled with uncertainty, but a willingness that reflected Maya's transformation. "What if we get caught?" he asked, the weight of his fear palpable in the air. "Then we face it together." The words felt both foreign and liberating, a pact woven in the face of adversity. Her voice was steadier now, mapping the contours of an unfamiliar confidence. They wouldn't be pawns of fate any longer. As they crouched low and darted toward the gap, her mind raced with pragmatic solutions, shaking off the brittle layers of her former self. Could she possibly navigate the intricacies of a life defined by choices instead of chances? She felt a pulse of power surge as she peered into the shadows behind the dock, strategizing like a player orchestrating a plan on the chessboard of her life. The sudden rustle drew her attention back. The men had stopped moving, their low murmurs coiling in the air, thickening the tension. Maya's instincts surged. She could almost feel the weight of their breath, their uncertainty mirroring her own. Now was not the time for surrender. No, she would not be merely running anymore. She was preparing to create a storm. "I'm ready to confront them," she said firmly, the certainty shocking as it fell from her lips. The hesitation that had trailed her for years now felt inconceivably distant. "Let's head back out. We can't be shadows anymore." Danny's expression flickered between fear and astonishment, recognizing the evolution brewing within her. There was strength in her willingness to confront the unknown, to lead, to reshape not just their circumstances but her own identity. As they crept back toward the figures, Maya's heart thundered, ironically invigorated by the danger. If this was to be a reckoning, it would be on her terms. "Are you ready?" she asked, feeling the spark of a newfound alliance between them, stronger than fear or doubt. "More than ever," he replied, a shared resolve igniting the air between them. With a single, resolute nod, they stepped deeper into the light, no longer escaping, but determined to claim their presence. The confrontation unfolded as they neared, the figures across the way looming larger in both physical and moral size. There was no turning back now. Would those emerging out of the darkness be their downfall, or catalysts for the decisive change both sought? Maya's breath steadied as she prepared to step toward her destiny. As she shifted into that crucible, the question loomed within her. Could she turn the tide, rewriting the narrative that had long dictated her life? With that thought resonating, she inhaled deeply, ready for the unexpected confrontation that would determine everything. A confrontation that would redefine who she was at her core. As the men turned to face her, the moment crystallized. It was either victory or defeat. But she was prepared to change her story forever. Where would this newfound courage lead her? Maya stepped into the light, her heart racing, each pulse echoing the weight of her decision. She locked eyes with the nearest figure, a man whose expression shifted from surprise to a predatory calm. This would be more than a confrontation. It was a metamorphosis, a transformative tableau where she would no longer be defined by her past, but by the choices she made in this instant. "Stop right there," she said, her voice firm and resonant, although an undercurrent of fear threatened to tremble through. The group turned, their authority palpable, cloaked in the unseen threats that had kept Maya and Danny quiet for far too long. "Who the hell do you think you are?" the man replied, his tone a mixture of amusement and contempt. The sneer on his face made it clear he viewed her as a mere nuisance, a flicker of defiance rather than a steady flame. "I'm the one who's done hiding," Maya shot back, a surprising strength washing over her. As she spoke, she felt the cognitive dissonance of her fear subside, replaced by the conviction she had unexpectedly unearthed. This had always been about reclaiming her life, but now it had transformed into a struggle for identity, for recognition. Danny stood beside her, his body tense yet resolute, reflecting the shift within them both. It was no longer about survival. It was about standing firm against the tides attempting to drown them. "What do you want?" the man asked, visibly annoyed. He stepped forward, and his companions followed, intimidation dripping from their every movement. But they underestimated the ferocity that had sparked within her. Maya realized this was not merely about gaining courage, but also about understanding her own worth. She had spent years considering herself less than, an afterthought in a world buzzing with chaos and danger. But those years of being overlooked sharpened her observations, honing skills she had never acknowledged, like reading the fractions of bravado wrapped around false postures. She knew now that her voice held power, a power she could wield. "I want you to understand that we're not your playthings anymore. We're not running. We're standing." Maya's words, as fragile as they might have sounded, felt like an explosion in the air. She could see doubt creep into her adversary's eyes, a tiny crack in the facade that screamed confidence. "Brave words from a girl who might not make it out alive," he responded, attempting to regain control of the situation. Yet the edge in his voice registered Maya's impact. Their game had shifted. "What's truly brave," she countered, "is facing the truth about who we are meant to be, regardless of the shadows you cast." Each word sharpened her focus on the present, solidifying her resolve into a weapon against fear. The murmurings of the men behind him shifted, their momentum faltering as Maya's boldness rippled through the dock like a tide. It was a revelation she had almost missed. Each decision sparks a new possibility, a new path, one that could lead to redemption or disaster. Breathing deeply, she contemplated her next move. The shadows that had loomed so large mere moments ago began to shrink as she stepped further into the confrontation. She could either rally her strength enough to take control of the situation or risk losing herself entirely. "What if I offer you something instead?" Maya asked, surprising even herself with the tactical shift. "Information. I know things you need, things that could unravel you just as easily." She had begun to think like a player in this dangerous game, envisioning ways to leverage knowledge, a hidden currency that could upset this power dynamic. The man's curiosity piqued, intrigue sparking in his gaze. "You're playing with fire, girl," he warned. Yet for the first time, Maya was no longer fearful of being burned. "What I'm playing with," she replied, "is the chance to rewrite my story. You're just an obstacle in the way." As their eyes locked, Maya knew she had managed to carve herself a space amid the chaos, a space from where she could enact change. With the adrenaline still surging, she calculated her next words strategically, knowing she was finally on the offensive. The confrontation had not only found its rhythm, it had transformed into a vision of control. The tides were turning, not only against the dark figures before her, but within her own psyche. This was her risk, her journey of self-discovery, unfurling before her like a roadmap to the future she never thought possible. But doubt loomed just behind every revelation, as she could easily lose herself in the labyrinth of deception. Would her newfound courage hold in the face of consequence? Would the battle for identity draw her closer to her dreams, or plunge her deeper into darkness? As their exchange registered, the question weighed heavily in the air. Could she alter the course of her life forever? Or would she become embroiled in a conflict that choked her potential? With that trepidation in mind, she prepared for the next move, a gamble that held the key to her destiny. Maya's heart raced as she felt the weight of the man's gaze dissecting her. Intrigue glittered in his eyes, which was more nerve-wracking than the sneer that preceded it. She sensed the reciprocal energy swirling around them. This wasn't merely a transaction, it was an unveiling of raw human tension. Yet beneath the bravado, another emotion flickered through the air. Urgency. Her offer hung between them, a knife edge on which her future teetered. When he tilted his head, contemplating her proposal, a sense of agency surged within her. She was no longer the frightened girl hiding in the shadows, caged by circumstance. For the first time, she wielded power, even if it was fragile and untested. She had initiated a power play, challenging not just these men, but also her own long-standing belief that she was powerless. "What do you think you know?" he sneered. But she noticed the tension in his shoulders and the unease tracing the steps of his companions. She leveraged that moment of hesitation. "I know about the shipments, where they're coming in, and where you store them. I've heard things that you wouldn't want anyone else to hear." Her voice held firm. The words flowed like a river of both danger and opportunity. "No one will believe you," he countered, crossing his arms defensively. But she saw the glistening doubt in his eyes, a riptide beneath his bravado. "You'll have to choose," she stated, her heart pounding. But it wasn't fear that drowned her. "You can either keep underestimating me, or we can have a partnership that could benefit us both." Every word dripped with conviction, each syllable heavy with the weight of her newfound identity. The thought of forming an alliance scrambled the instincts within her, the sharks circling a sail. Could she really step into the shark tank without losing herself? The stakes were dangerously high, but in that moment, the idea of remaining trapped in fear felt worse than any conceivable risk she could take now. "What's in it for you?" the man guardedly pressed. "You must want something more than just survival." The question hit deep. What did she truly seek? The visceral longing to break free surged within her. I want a life beyond this chaos, one where I can make my own choices. The honesty startled even herself, but it felt liberating, tearing open a crevice of vulnerability she hadn't expected to unveil amidst the conflict. She could hear her own heartbeat now, each thud a step closer to freedom. It was a reinvention not just of her identity, but of her whole existence. She recognized the threads of manipulation that lined the darkest corners of her choices. But it was empowerment she desired, and this could be a key step. A palpable silence ensued, and the tension curdled the air. The other men shifted uneasily, clearly uninspired by her audacity, but their apprehension was her strength. Something had shifted, as if the tide was gathering for a storm. The man's brow furrowed as he processed the implications. "You're either a risk or an opportunity," he murmured, lost in thought. "What makes you think I should trust you?" "Because, if I'm telling the truth," she pressed, leaning in just slightly, "I know how to tear this whole operation down." The realization surged through her. She had power, negotiable and terrifying. She could pivot the very structure of their dynamic. Maya felt the atmosphere crackle as the man weighed his options. Would he let fear wane and embrace a potential partnership? Or would he stick to the familiar grip of dominance, risking exposure? The decision dangled precariously between them as he narrowed his gaze. She could taste the potential. Her desire for safety, autonomy, and purpose sparked a formidable resolve deep inside. "What's your plan?" he finally asked, the slightest hint of curiosity percolating through his suspicion. As Maya prepared to reveal her strategy, confidence coursed through her veins. She was standing on the precipice of transformation, teetering between old entrapments and the promise of liberation extended toward her. She took a breath, knowing that this moment could lead to betrayal or salvation, liberation or loss. "Meet me tomorrow at the diner. I'll show you exactly how to secure your future," she said, her voice steady, her eyes unwavering. In that tense lull, she understood the ambiguity in their shared gaze, knowing it set her up for potential triumph or defeat. A deep question loomed. Would her gamble unfold into the life she sought, or would she become ensnared in a web of darker dealings that could snuff out her flame once and for all? As she turned to leave, anticipation churned within her. The game was just beginning, and she could almost feel the threads of fate sifting through her fingers. What awaited her in that diner might trigger a reckoning of her own choices, one that would forcibly define who she chose to become. Maya's pulse synced with the rhythm of her thoughts as she approached the diner the next day. The neon sign buzzed overhead, flickering like her nerves. No longer was she just a girl in a grim situation. Today, she was a player in a high-stakes game. Her fingers brushed against the folded strategy notes in her pocket, a tangible reminder of her intent to carve a new path. As she stepped through the door, the familiar scent of fried food clashed vividly with the risks she carried into the room. The chatter of patrons enveloped her, but she fixated on a dimly lit corner booth where he waited, her potential ally or her greatest adversary. She'd spent sleepless hours yanking her mind back and forth over the potential outcomes of this meeting, grappling with fleeting insecurities and burgeoning determination. The stark white plates and clinking silverware bore no relation to the dark world she had entered. Today, they were her canvas. She intended to paint a new chapter. "Glad you could make it," he smirked, though his eyes glinted with a thin layer of uncertainty. She slid into the booth across from him, throat dry but resolute. "Let's cut to the chase," she began, the quiver in her voice a remnant of her earlier self, but masked by the conviction forming roots within her. "I've mapped key routes and schedules. We can get your operation running, clean and efficient, but you need to play this smart." She laid out her plan, piecing together the elements she had scrutinized over the months, the dock schedules, the entrenched rivalries, the loopholes in his dealings. As she spoke, an ignition sparked in his eyes, and she could sense him reevaluating her, his understanding of her shifting moment by moment. Was it truly possible that she might be guiding a man stuck in a web of his own making? She stopped suddenly, realizing she was spilling deeper truths than merely operational tactics. This can't just be a transaction for you. You need to think beyond power. If you want more than just dominance, then you have to earn trust, not demand it. His brows knit together, showcasing anger simmering beneath his surface. Trust is earned with loyalty, not ideals. Yes, but loyalty thrives in mutual benefit, she countered, feeling the urgency rising. You think I'm here just to help you? I'm here because I need a way out too. This isn't just about survival for me anymore. It's about making choices that actually mean something. Silence fell as he absorbed her words, tension building like an impending storm. Can I really trust this girl? Her resilient vulnerability captivated him. Let's say I entertain this idea of yours. What's stopping you from double-crossing me? The question stung, not because it lacked validity, but due to how it yanked at her historical instincts. Self-preservation had always come first. The old Maya might have flinched, but the new version, brimming with purpose, only welcomed the challenge. Nothing. You're right to ask. But know this. Your path and mine intersect today. I want my own liberation. This partnership is a stepping stone for both of us. Her candidness may have surprised even herself. The stakes were growing, but so was her tenacity. What makes you think your plan will actually work? Because I've lived in this world long enough to know its weaknesses. Each contract needs assurance. Each scheme has a loop. The question isn't if it can work. It's whether you're willing to act. At that moment, feeding off the charge between them, she could see the gears turning in his mind. She understood the gravity of their connection. Two individuals keenly aware of the dynamics of threat and alliance. The confrontation entwined her fate with his, each holding an elaborately layered piece of the puzzle. I'll consider what you said, he finally replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya felt the ground shift beneath them. This was more than just an exchange. It was the evidence of her evolution, her realization that choices could forge unexpected paths. As she rose from the booth, the words echoed in her mind. Consider. He might be on board. He might not. But either way, she was no longer tethered to just survival. She was ready for confrontation, ready to dismantle a world built on manipulation and fear. The ringing of the bell above the diner door marked her exit into a world that had begun to unfurl before her. But as excitement bubbled through her veins, a shadow loomed ahead, the hesitation of doubt. Would her bravery translate into lasting change, or would she plunge deeper into the abyss? Tomorrow would shift everything yet again. Would she emerge powerful, or would the tides of fate drag her down? Maya awoke the next morning with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The sunlight streaming through her window felt almost foreign, as if illuminating the stark reality of her choices from the previous day. The air was heavy with possibility as she reviewed the details of her plan. She was no longer just a passive survivor. She was in control, drawing the strings of her own fate. As she dressed, her mind raced through every detail of her conversation with him. She had secured a foothold in a perilous world, but this tenuous alliance was still a gamble. The thought of betrayal prickled her skin, but she pushed it aside. Doubt would only anchor her to a life she longed to escape. She made her way to the coffee shop, a new haunt where the unfamiliar buzz of conversation felt invigorating. Grabbing a seat at the counter, she fished her notebook from her bag and began sketching the framework of her next moves, solidifying tactics while ensuring she didn't lose sight of the moral high ground she sought to maintain. Her mind drifted to the potential repercussions of her decisions. The stakes were astronomically higher now. One misstep could unravel everything she was building. Yet, there was also clarity in her purpose. She recognized that to ascend, she had to face the uncomfortable truths of her reality. Moments later, as she sipped her coffee, her phone vibrated against the wood countertop. slicing through her thoughts. The message was from him. "Meet me at the docks at noon. We need to talk." Her heart raced, torn between anxiety and a thrill she hadn't anticipated. The docks had always been a place of secrets, teeming with life, yet dripping with beneath-the-surface tension. She felt the weight of her decision settle upon her as she made her way there. This was beyond just a meeting now. It was an opportunity to cement her role in this checkered world. When she arrived, a salty breeze tugged at her clothes, the sound of waves crashing echoing her pulse. He was already there, leaning against a weathered crate, arms crossed, an expression contemplative. The tumult of his world, with its dangerous undercurrents, seemed to swirl around them both. "Glad you could make it," he said, his voice carrying a hint of something softer, perhaps respect. "I wanted to get to the essence of what we talked about yesterday," she replied, her pulse steadying as she took a breath. "You need to understand that this isn't simply about logistics. It's about our reputation, yours and mine." He nodded slowly, and for the first time, she glimpsed a chink in his armor. "I've seen a lot of people who are willing to double-cross me to gain more power. How do you intend to operate differently?" Her mind formulated the answer, and she spoke with conviction. "Because I understand the value of reciprocity. To gain influence, you must foster alliances rather than fear. We both know how feeble power based on intimidation can be." He watched her, the shadows mixing with curiosity in his gaze. "And you think that philosophy will keep you alive in this business?" "It will if I choose my connections wisely," she replied, the weight of her words grounding her further. At that moment, a gang of men rounded the corner, and the tension in the air shifted palpably. They seemed to embody the chaos that had plagued both their lives. But this wasn't the time to retreat. It was another opportunity to fortify her resolve. Instead of shrinking away, she turned to him, sensing a shared understanding. "We need to address them together," she urged, her voice unwavering. "This is how we begin to establish our ground." Their attention fixed on the approaching figures, she felt something shift internally. This was no longer just about survival. It was about redefining the structure of power they both existed within. As they approached, questions brewed in Maya's mind. Would her strategies hold against this new test? Would her approach resonate with him? The time had truly come to face the realities she had skirted around. "Step up," he remarked quietly, and Maya felt the weight of his challenge sink into her bones. This was her moment to not just vocalize her influence, but to claim it with authority. With her heart pounding, she met their gazes, ready to confront the forces that stood between her and the life she dared to envision. Would her voice resonate with strength? Or would it be drowned out amid the chaos of their world? In that charged silence, everything hinged on the choices they made next. As the men approached, Maya's senses sharpened, aligning her past with a steely resolve that wrapped around her like armor. Their presence crackled in the air with palpable intensity, an unwelcome reminder of the shadows that had long threatened to engulf her certainty. Yet, as they paused before the pair, she felt a surge of empowerment ripple through her. This was her moment. Not just to defend herself, but to take command of her narrative. "Who's this?" the lead figure snarled, scanning Maya with a mix of contempt and curiosity. The disdain in his voice was as tangible as the knives they were likely carrying. "This is Maya. She's with me," Danny replied, his voice unwavering yet carefully modulated to assert both solidarity and protection. Maya recognized that their alliance had matured into something profound, a mutual acknowledgement of the stakes at hand. Together, they would unravel the prerogatives that had long been taken for granted. "What makes this chit different from all the others you've had? What value does she bring?" The lead thug scoffed, his companions shifting uneasily as if sensing a storm brewing. "Value?" Maya stepped forward, undeterred. "How about the insight needed to steer clear of pitfalls that have ensnared you?" I know how things work in this town. The words flowed as if they had always resided within her. Each syllable carried the weight of her lived experience. Look at her, trying to play with the big boys, one of the men jeered, dismissing her confidence with a scoff. But Maya felt a fire ignite within her. It was time to confront not only the men before her, but also the perception of her own worth. Before she could respond, Danny intervened, an edge of protectiveness tinting his voice. You think you're better than her? That your entitled behavior gives you an edge? Maya's lived through adversity in ways you can't begin to understand. She knows the streets, the back doors, and the weaknesses in your game better than any of you. Each word out of Danny's mouth bolstered Maya's confidence, creating a formidable barrier against the sneers aimed at them. She glanced at him, grateful and emboldened. Together they were crafting a different path, one rooted in mutual respect rather than fear. In that pivotal moment, Maya realized how far she had come. She was no longer a mere player on a board set by others. Each instance of doubt and reluctance melted into the insistent whisper of empowerment. She turned back to the gang, who were underestimating their resolve. Here's the truth. This endless cycle of fear and brutality is only going to lead to your own demise. You cling to a game that serves no one, not even yourselves. The realization that she could speak her truth was liberating. You want growth? Partnership? Consider this collaboration an opportunity to rise above. I can provide intel, strategies, the very things that help you evade the threats looming over your heads. The lead thug's smirk faltered, a flicker of intrigue sparking behind his hardened demeanor. That serendipitous moment turned the tide. Her audacity, their synergy, was altering perceptions in real time. What do you know about getting ahead, princess? He taunted, attempting to undermine her. A classic power move. Maya inhaled deeply, feeling the tumult in her throat transform into clarity. More than you realize. I know enough to see possibilities where you see obstacles. This isn't merely about toughness. It's about effective strategies and fostering relationships. If you want to stay relevant in this cutthroat environment, you do well to rethink your approach. Such clarity in her words. Did she even recognize the transformation she had undergone over an incredibly short breath of time? Here stood a woman crafted from challenges, standing toe-to-toe with danger, and threading hope into a reality ripe for recalibration. As Danny shifted slightly closer beside her, the push of their combined conviction resumed its momentum, urging her forward. It hit her. She had transcended her initial desires of mere survival. This moment was about assertion, the trademark of her newfound identity. What's it going to be? Danny's voice held an edge, inviting their adversaries to reconsider. You think you can actually change the game? The thug countered, interest beginning to glimmer behind his dismissive gaze. I'll prove it, Maya declared, their eyes locked in a fierce showdown of wills. But for any of this to work, we have to redefine the way we think about power. Today, we create an alliance built on credibility and mutual respect, instead of fear. Danny's stare solidified into unyielding strength as he nodded once more, reinforcing her declaration. Maya felt the atmosphere shift as whispers of doubt began to slink into the shadows. The gang were men who thrived on intimidation, yet here they stood, a woman and a man embracing vulnerability and authenticity, daring to reshape the narrative. Fine. We'll give you this chance. The lead thug relented, voice low and begrudging. But any sign of betrayal, and your lives aren't worth the dirt on my boots. Fair enough, Maya replied, the adrenaline coursing through her as she felt the energy of imminent change swell. There was a potent resolve embedded in this burgeoning alliance, a recognition that transformation began the moment they asserted control over their choices. Don't waste the opportunity, Danny cautioned, his voice imbued with sincerity. The shift had already propelled them forward, but their journey was just beginning. As the sigh of relief mingled with the air, Maya turned away from the gang. Here was an opening, a potential visibility, one that shone a light on her intentions beyond survival. With determined steps, they melded into a walk toward the horizon of possibility, emboldened. This was the moment she had long desired, one where a woman broke free from the shadows while influencing the world, in tandem with another previously bound by expectation. In that dawning connection, paired to the core of her soul, Maya understood that their shared resilience marked the beginning of a wider transformation, unlike any she had ever experienced. The tides of fate had shifted, but they had both learned what it meant to navigate through their own choices, rather than merely reacting. The confrontation marked not just their survival, but the emergence of authentic, purposed lives set against the backdrop of preordained darkness. As they walked forward together, each step resonated, both a promise of potential and a reclamation of agency, while shadows faded in the wake of breakthrough, alive with palpable empowerment. And in that moment, Maya knew with unparalleled certainty. This was her pathway to triumph, and no man could mar the clarity she finally embraced. It was solid, undeniable, a full-circle transformation that brought her every aspiration into one complete realization. She was the architect of her own destiny, a legacy poised to redefine the very principles that once sought to entrap her. This was Maya's true moment of achievement, her voice rising from the ashes of adversity, not merely as a woman stepping out of shadows, but as a formidable force claiming her rightful place within the world. The wind shifted, carrying whispers of change. Now the question loomed: how far could they venture together, and what would this newfound partnership mean for them and the lives they impacted? With her mind racing, she stepped into the unfolding horizon, ready for the challenges and transformations that lay ahead, knowing that the script was finally in her own hands. Don't wait even one more second. If you love this exceptional journey of reinvention, you need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss more exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now, feeding the algorithm to ensure more inspiring narratives reach those in need. Share this powerful conclusion immediately with at least 5 friends who crave personal overcoming tales just like this one. Your voice deserves to be part of this narrative. Comment below your reactions and theories about what's next for Maya. Your thoughts could shape our next chapter.